Hi guys, Rob from Solomon Studio, and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint Mythic Battles Pantheon Spartans. Hi guys, welcome to Solomon Studios channel. I'm looking to do a painting tutorial on all of my Mythic Battles Pantheon pledge. As I go through, I'm looking to show you things like basic airbrushing techniques, basic painting techniques, basing techniques, things that are going to show you how to paint your models to get them on the board rather than having grey plastic figures. By no means are they studio standard painting, they are just basic hobbyist level painting that anyone can do with practice and time. We're not doing any techniques that are brand new. There's going to be a lot of channels out there that I steal my stuff from. If that's the case, I will do a shout out to a lot of the channels that I use things from. There is a lot of useful painting tips out there already. I'm just hoping that I can add to that and you find this channel really useful. So without taking any more of your time, let's jump into painting these Spartans.
Okay, so here we're starting with our Zenithal primed Spartan. See the list of paints we're using for the skin here. On this first part, I'm just sort of showing you the quantity that I use to mix. It's usually 50-50 parts Vallejo airflow improver, flow improver and water, and then to that just a couple of drops of the Talon flesh because I want the Zenithal prime to show through, and just mix this up in the pot and then give it a blow back to kind of make sure there's no remnants in the bottom of the cup. Always before you don't go straight to spraying on the model. Off camera here I'm just spraying onto a little piece of scrap paper to make sure it's coming out okay, and then we're just, the air pressure was actually a little bit too high here, so I make a little mistake, but you can see how I just blow some air over it and then layer the paint back over once it's dry and cover that up, and then we're just applying a thin coat to the model, letting those pre-shades show through. It's best to start thin and do lots of coats because one, you'll get a cleaner, less speckled look, but the other thing is that you can always add more paint, you can't take it away, so building those layers up until you get a shade that you're happy with is the best way to go. Now yes, that does take a little bit longer, but you're using an airbrush so it's quicker than painting anyway, and you can get quite good effects with that. Don't have to be neat here, as you can see. We're getting a lot of overspray on parts that aren't going to be this colour, but this is just so we can quickly get this layer down. We're going to be painting those areas afterwards anyway, so it doesn't matter if you get a little bit of overspray. So we can see I'm just going over, and sort of as I've finished doing the legs, the chest and arms are dry, so I can go back. If they're not quite dry, I can always just, without pulling the trigger back, just pushing the trigger down, I can give them a blast of air to dry that paint off, so I can give it another coat as I wasn't happy with the first shade and wanted to layer on another. Now we're transitioning to the next colour. Now with this, I don't give a full clean down of the airbrush. I just dump the old paint out and sort of give it a quick rinse through, but there's always going to be remnants left in the bottom. That's fine as long as you mix them up with the next shade. It helps with the transition of colours. And again, we're just layering over the top of our initial shade. Best here as well if you kind of angle it slightly above to mimic the zenithal shade, and then it's leaving the initial pre-color pre-shades that you've put down. Same thing for the next color, because this is our final, it's our second to last highlight. We're just sort of picking out the raised areas. So you can see here that I am mainly just spraying from the top down and then going in and catching just a few of the areas to give it more highlight. Just for a final highlight, I just added a little bit of the Vallejo white primer into the mix to give it that final highlight. And then just to bring all those transitions together, the final stage on the skin here is a Army Painter flesh wash, and it's watered down, so we're just glazing it over the top of those transitions to help tie them all in together. It also helps to form a break between the two of the areas you don't want to be skin anymore, like the leather areas which we're painting now. So quite simple. I just start with Citadel Classic Calvin Brown, and I cover all of the areas that are leather, but I also cover the areas that are the parts of the red cloak, because it's quite a good base coat for red. Starting from browns gives quite a natural look. So I'm base coating the brown onto all the areas that are going to be either white, red or leather later. See, I'm being quite messy with this. As long as you're not getting it over the skin, you'll then cover it with the other paints later. It's like laying up from the bottom down. So we do the skin first, and then we can do the things like the leather and the cloak next, because then the gold and silver area is going to be above those, so any mistakes you're making you're covering up. So once the brown's dry, any area that's going to be leather, I've then gone over with an Agrax Earthshade wash glaze, slightly watered down, just so that it's picking out the details of that model. Good thing about these Mythic Pantheon models is that they're so well detailed that a wash can kind of just bring it to life. It's doing most of the job for you. Now moving on to painting the red cloaks. I started with a layer over the top of the Calphone Brown of Ammo MIG Red Primer. Now actually you can see as this is going on that I had a bit of trouble with this painting. The quality of it is fine, I just haven't shaken it enough here, which is something I realised sort of halfway through painting. So just to make sure on some of these paints, you get the same with Army Painter as well, that adding in an agitator to the pot and making sure that you shake that pot up really well before you start can just make sure that you've got all of that paint agitated and mixed up to a good quality. You can see here it's going on quite, it's almost like a glaze, and I think it's at this point where I look at it and think, oh actually let's give it a shake up, and we can see that it's going on much better now that I've given it that shake. So I think at this is the point where I go through again and start layering over the whole. Yeah, so we can see it's going on much better. Essentially this is sort of a ready brown, which is quite good for the base coats. Like I said, I wanted to achieve quite a sort of realistic dirty look to these rather than the look that's been seen before of quite bright red cloaks. It's just personal preference really. So here now I'm going up to the next stage where I'm layering over red gore, I believe it is, and we're just leaving that red, that darker reddy brown in the creases to give that shade. As a tip whilst you're doing these cloak shades, I would say it's quite good to keep the brush going in the direction of the cloak. You can see here that I'm sort of brushing down the direction of the cloak fall. It helps drag that paint into areas. It's making the paint work for you. There's probably a technical name for it, I'm not sure what that is, but sort of as you drag that paint along in that direction, it gives you that highlight effect. So now we're going up to the next stage. I'm mixing a little bit of blood red with the red gore, and again you can see me adding it in. If it's going on a little bit too sharp, I kind of wash off the brush and just use a brush that isn't loaded with paint to feather that paint around. I'm just picking out those highlighted areas. See, there was quite a good example of how we're using the brush to manipulate the paint in the direction of the flow of the cloak, and quite subtle transitions between the colours. Again, this is personal preference. If you want quite stark transitions, you can just go for brighter colours and not mix between the two. Here I'm just taking a red glaze and glazing it over the top of all of those transitions. It ties them all back in. It stops there being that kind of jump between steps. Again, if you like quite stark transitions, you can always leave this part out. I quite like the natural look. So moving on to the gold, using Army Painter Weapon Bronze and Army Painter Bright Gold. There's a highlight with a Agrax Earth shade in the middle. So we're just layering on, again we're layering on the paint here. You don't need to be tidy with it because we're going to wash over this. You just need to make sure that you're not covering areas that you've finished already. And this is kind of, through painting models, my tip for kind of churning out quite a few. But obviously you're seeing just one being painted here. I had all three, and I'd do each stage to all three of them at the same time. Is not to worry about being messy, as long as you're not getting paint on areas that you've finished, and then because you're going to be covering them up later. A lot of people spend time meticulously getting each stage perfect, whereas actually you're going to be painting over some of those mistakes anyway. So like you can see here, whilst I'm painting the gold, the leather straps on the back of the shield were quite messy, but actually as I'm painting the gold layers in, it's covering up that mess. Whereas if I'd have spent time getting those straps right, I'd still be doing the same stage now. So kind of what I've saved in time doing the messy straps, I'm covering up now. So it's just planning through. It's always, when you get a model, just taking a look at it and thinking to yourself, okay, let's dress that model up. So starting from the lowest point, which is usually the skin, or if they're injured, it's going to be things like wounds, cuts and grazes, although sometimes it is good to do those last because you want some of that mess to overspill if you want it to look like quite a fresh wound. But we're just sort of building up each layer, so looking at the model, planning through what you're going to do before you even start painting. And that's usually quite a good thing to do after you've done the Zenithal shade, because it brings that model to life. It makes it look 3D, whereas sometimes the grey plastic, you can look at it and you don't get that sense of depth in the model. So yeah, we layer on that gold on the shield, the helmet, and the leg braces, I'm going to call them. That could be wrong. If they have a proper name and you know it, please feel free to leave in the comments below. Even though we've laid quite a messy gold layer, we're applying an Agrax earth shade over that. It kind of shows, you can see it sticking to the recesses, but I quite like to apply, some people just apply the glaze to the area, into the area to create the shade. I like applying it all over because it tones down the paint, and then when we go in now with our highlighted gold, we can just pick out some of the ridges to give that sort of shining gold effect. Just picking out those raised areas where the light might catch off of it. It's quite a subtle step, but when the model's finished, it does give it that kind of shiny look. You can see I made a little bit of a mistake there, applied too much, so I just rub it off with my thumb and go back and make the adjustment. So moving on to the silver here, Army Painter plate mail and Nuln Oil, Citadel Nuln Oil wash. So we're just, again, same thing, applying our base coat. You can see here that I'm being much more careful with applying this layer because we've got finished painting next to it now. So this is where instead of taking the time being careful painting the cloak, I can take the time now rather than doing it. But I would have had to have done that anyway. So instead of taking that time 2, 3, 4 times, sometimes you're just cutting down on that process by only having to do it on the final stage. Actually find sometimes when you're painting models, it's not until you get to the last 2 or 3 stages you start to get happier with it, because it can look quite messy leading up to it, because obviously you've got quite a lot of overpaint. We can see here now already, because we're getting to the final stages, we can see that actually the model's getting that little bit neater. Picked out the sword and we're picking out the brooch that holds the cloak, and then we're picking out these little sort of metal rivets on the armour. So I actually found with this step, having a small build up of paint on the edge of your brush helped to catch just the raised rivet. You can kind of you can see here, you're just sort of dotting it on and then picking out the ringlets on the bottom. I think there you can see I applied maybe a little bit too much paint, so I just go in, take water, wash it in and take it away. So once all the metal areas are completed, I'm then going over with Nuln Oil wash. So I'm just applying it over the top of those rivets to kind of bring them to life, and then over the top of the other areas to tone that shiny metal down and give it more of a used metal look. So then we're moving on to the white cloth or white areas. I've also kind of done the same here on the handle to give it that kind of ivory look. So we've got Army Painter Skeleton Bone, which is going over our Coltham Brown base coat that we already painted. Just take a dry brush and going against the plume on the top, so you kind of, the plume's going up, so I'm dragging the paint across. And then we're going in with a skeleton bone mixed with a little bit of Vallejo white primer just to lighten it up. I can't imagine that Spartans worry too much about splitting their whites from their colours in their wash, so I didn't want to go just a straight white. I wanted to still give it that kind of dirty cloth look. See there is more of an overbrush. I then applied an Agrax Earthshade wash to the plumes, and then here the beards I'm just picking out with that grey, and then after this I give them a Nuln oil wash, and then this is the finished model. So you can see it in all its glory with the base finished. I will do a separate tutorial for the base, and I'll probably do a separate tutorial for the zenithal shading as well to help people out. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you see.